So you've got £10,000 to invest. Maybe it came from a bonus, an inheritance, or from years of putting money aside. However it happened, you're now sitting on a sum that, if invested well, has the genuine potential to grow and make a real difference to your financial future. The question is, where do you start? Hello, I'm Brian, and today with Moneyfarm, I'll try to answer exactly that. We're going to cover what to think about before you invest, what your options are, and how to get started, so that by the end of this video, you've got a clear picture of what to do next. So let's dive in. Before we talk about where to put your money, let's cover two fundamental rules, because skipping these is where a lot of first-time investors come unstuck. Rule 1. Build your emergency fund first. Before you invest, consider how much accessible cash you need to feel comfortable in an emergency. For some, that might be a few months of expenses. For others, it may be more. It really does depend on your situation. Although a good starting guide is about 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. Now, as we all know, life doesn't always go to plan. And if something like a job loss, a boiler breakdown, or an unexpected bill comes your way, you don't want to be forced to sell your investments to cover it, which leads straight on to rule 2. Only invest money you can afford to leave alone for at least 5 years. Unlike cash in a savings account, investments go up and down in value in the short term. If you need to sell when markets happen to be low, you could get back less than you put in. So you need time to give your money the best chance to recover and grow. If both of these boxes are ticked, you're in a good position to start thinking seriously about your £10,000. So that's the basics. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of choosing investments, you need to answer one question. What's this money for? Now, I know that sounds obvious, but having a clear goal makes every decision that follows that much easier. Are you investing towards a house move, building a pot you can draw on if you wanted to start a business or change career, saving for retirement, or just building long-term financial resilience without a specific destination in mind? The reason this matters is that your goal shapes your timeline, and your timeline shapes how much risk you might consider taking on. Here's the basic principle. In investing, risk and potential return tend to move together. Take on more risk and you open the door to stronger long-term growth, but also to bigger short-term swings. Take on less and your ride is smoother, but your potential upside is more limited. Shares, for example, are generally considered higher risk than bonds, and shares in smaller or emerging market companies typically carry more risk than those in large, well-established businesses, the kind you'd find in the FTSE 100 in the UK or the S&P 500 in the US. So, where does your timeline come in? Well, investors with more time on their side are generally better placed to take on some of that higher risk because they have the runway to ride out short-term dips and wait for markets to recover. On the other hand, those with a shorter horizon often prefer to keep things steadier. But here's something worth saying clearly. Having the capacity to take on risk isn't the same as being comfortable with it. Some people can watch their portfolio fall in value and stay calm, while others find it generally stressful. Now, both are completely valid, and knowing where you sit matters just as much as knowing your timeline. And while we're talking about time, there's one concept that's worth taking a moment on, because it goes right to the heart of why investing your £10,000 over the long term is so compelling. It's called compounding, and the idea is simple. Any returns you earn on your investments can themselves generate returns, and over time, this creates a snowball effect. So the longer you stay invested, the more powerful it becomes. In the early years, the impact can feel modest, but zoom out to 10, 20, or 30 years, and compounding can transform what your money does in a way that's generally hard to replicate through savings alone. Think about it this way. If your £10,000 grows by a set amount in year 1, in year 2, you're not just growing your original £10,000, you're growing everything that's already accumulated on top of it. Then in year 3, the same thing happens again, because the returns compound. Now, you sometimes hear the quote that Einstein called compounding the 8th wonder of the world. Well, to be fair, whether he actually said that or not, nobody really knows. But the principle is real, and it's one of the most powerful arguments for starting to invest sooner rather than later. Okay, so you've thought about your goals, your timeline, and how you feel about risk. Now, for the part most people jump straight to, what can you actually invest in? Well, the honest answer is a lot. And that choice can feel quite overwhelming at first, so let's break it down. The first thing worth deciding is how involved you want to be, because there are essentially two paths, and which one is right for you depends as much on your personality as it does on your finances. The first option is the DIY route. Now, if you're comfortable making your own investment decisions, you can build your own portfolio from scratch. And while the choice of what to invest in can feel overwhelming at first, if you're investing for the long term, think 10 years or more, and especially if retirement is part of that picture, there's a simple rule of thumb that can help you think about how to split your £10,000 across different asset types. Take the number 100 and subtract your age. The result gives you a rough guide to the percentage you might consider putting into higher risk investments, like shares or equities. So if you're 35, for example, that's around 65% in equities. If you're 50, it's around 50%. The logic behind it is straightforward for long-term goals. The younger you are, the more runway you have to ride out short-term market swings. So you can afford to take on more risk in pursuit of stronger growth over time. Now, as retirement approaches and your timeline shortens, you gradually shift towards steadier, lower risk assets. The remaining percentage, whatever isn't in equities, will typically go into bonds. Bonds are essentially loans to governments or companies, and they tend to be less volatile than shares, which makes them a useful counterbalance in a portfolio. Now, you can access them easily through a bond ETF or a UK government gilt fund. So on our £10,000, using the 100 minus age rule for a 35-year-old, that would look something like this: around £6,500 into a globally diversified equity fund, something tracking the FTSE All-World Index, for example, which would give you exposure to thousands of companies across the US, Europe, Asia, and beyond. The rest, £3,500, will go into something more prudent, like a pool of government bonds. That said, this rule is most useful as a starting point for long horizon investing. If your goals are shorter term, say you're aiming to buy a house in the next few years, for example, your age matters less than your timeline, and you'd likely want to keep things considerably more cautious regardless. Now, this formula isn't perfect, and it's worth saying clearly that it's a starting point, not a prescription, as everyone's situation is different, and the right allocation for you depends on your specific goals, your income, and how you generally feel about seeing your portfolio go up and down in value. But it's a useful place to begin as a way of getting off the blank page and thinking concretely about how to structure a £10,000 investment portfolio. As for the actual instruments, well, ETFs and index funds are where most DIY investors start, and for good reason. They're low cost, they give you instant diversification, and they're straightforward to buy and hold for the long term. We've got dedicated videos on both ETFs and index funds on this channel, so if you want to go into deeper detail on either, check them out. To actually build your own portfolio and buy the instruments, you can use a platform like Moneyfarm, where you can get access to thousands of assets, including ETFs, shares, bonds and funds from markets all over the world. So the building blocks are all there whenever you're ready. Now, if all of that sounds like more involvement than you actually want, or you'd simply rather have professionals handling the decisions, there's a straightforward alternative. And honestly, for a lot of people, this is the more sensible path. Not because DIY investing is beyond them, but because the best investment strategy is ultimately the one you'll actually stick with. And for many people, that means having someone else take care of the day-to-day. This is the ready-made portfolios route, and it's something you could do with Moneyfarm. To start, you download the app from the link in the description, answer a few questions about your goals, your timeline, and your attitude to risk, and then, based on your answers, you're matched with one of 7 portfolios, ranging from more cautious to more aggressive ones. And from there, Moneyfarm's investment team takes care of everything, building the portfolio, monitoring it, and rebalancing it when market movements push it off course to keep it aligned with your strategy over time. You stay fully in the loop, and you can track your performance in the app at any time. And there's always support available if your circumstances change or if you have questions. But you don't have to make the ongoing investment calls yourself, which for some people feels like a burden lifted from their shoulders. So there you have it, an honest look at how to start investing with £10,000. If you found this video useful, please subscribe to the channel, and if you have any questions, drop a comment below. And as always, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye bye for now.